Hi, this is Donna. Welcome to DD Paper Crafts, and in today's video we're going to be making this noughts and crosses or tic-tac-toe style tray, which contains 8 1.5 inch square treat boxes. I would recommend that you make the treat boxes first because then it's easier to adapt the size of the tray. And let's get started. For the game pieces, we want 8 squares which measure 1.5 by 1.5. And one thing I would say to start with is don't assume that your starting piece of cardstock is square. Many times I've cut a 1.5 inch strip or a 1 inch strip off the side of a piece of card and then wondered why it's slightly out aligned. So I always cut my straight edge first and work from that. Another thing I would say, it's probably difficult to show this on camera, but whilst this is black cardstock, this has got a different finish. You can see that's quite dull, and on that side it's quite shiny. So as we move forward and you're doing your cutting and your scoring, I always try to make sure I've got the same side facing up as I do my scoring. So for the top or the lid of the piece, we want 8 squares which are 2.5 inches square, and on all 4 sides we're going to score at 1/2 inch. On all 8 of your pieces, you want to cut into the central tab facing you, rotate, cut a wedge, rotate it back and cut a wedge, and this is going to be your back tab that's going to sit into the game piece. And then on the tabs this side, we're going to just cut straight up each of these score lines, cut away the outer corner, and then we will adjust as necessary the wedges on these once we've put the lid in place. And then our final section is the side of the piece. This measures 6.5 by 2 inches. Along the 2 inch side you want to score at 1/2 inch, and along the 6 inch side we're going to score at 1/2 inch, 2 inches, 3.5 inches and 5 inches. And then on each piece in the second full square along I've cut a finger notch. We want to thoroughly burnish each of these score lines, and personally I find that the more I burnish the better finish I get on my box. So with our 1/2 inch tab facing us, cut a wedge into the top left hand piece, a wedge into the end of the tab, turn and cut a wedge. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold the piece over so my 1 inch square is underneath, and I'm going to cut a wedge, and I'm cutting through the 2 pieces of cardstock at the same time. And the reason I do it this way is because I've found that if I cut up this side and then cut up that side, I get a horrible little wispy bit in the middle. And doing it this way, that just seems to reduce that issue. So I've got my piece, and now all I'm going to do is work my way round using my quick grab glue, adhere the pieces around my base square. So I'm going to square that up as much as I can. go in with my score tool just to burnish those tabs down, and if necessary, I do have any overhang, I will just go in with my scissors once that's dry and just trim off any bits which are overhanging. Finally, we're going to add our lid, and we just want to make sure that we add our glue to the tab that we cut the wedges into, and that goes opposite our finger notch if you've added one. I just put the lid in, flip it back, and then press it down. Then what we'll do is we'll close the lid, and where the tab hits the front of the box, I'm going to make a pencil mark on both sides like so, and then I'm going to cut from the pencil mark up to the corner to create the angle for the tab. And you should find that when you close the lid, that closes nice and snugly. So you want to do that 8 times. So I'm going to choose not to decorate the outer edges of the box, but on the top I've got an X and an O from my alphabet dies, and I'm going to cut 4 in red metallic, 4 gold, and I'm going to add 1 to the top of each box. For the top and the base of the card, I've cut 2 squares which are 6 7/8 inch square, and I determined the size by allowing for a 1/2 inch border around my boxes, 1/2 inch between the placement of my boxes, and my boxes were 1.5 inches, and I've allowed for a 1 5/8 inch square for my box to sit in. I did not have a square die which was the right size. I found the easiest way to move forward was to create a cutting guide, which I would then adhere to my top piece, and I would then use my craft knife and ruler to cut the squares into the top by hand. I've cut a piece of copy paper which is 6 7/8 inch squared, and you can either lightly go in using the tracks of the scoreboard as you do your marking, or if you're more comfortable, line up your ruler with your lines and go in with a pencil and mark your lines accordingly. I'm going to use my score tool and just lightly score. So I've gone around each edge at 1/2 inch and scored. So my next score line is going to be at 2 1/8 inch. I'm then going to leave a 1/2 inch gap, so that's 2 5/8 inch. I'm then going to have a 1 5/8 inch score line, so that's at 4 1/4. I'm then going to have a 1/2 inch gap, which is 4 3/4, and that should leave me with a 1 5/8 inch section. Rotate the cardstock and do exactly the same. So I'm scoring, I've got my 1/2 inch score line, I'm going to score 1 5/8 inch across, which is 2 1/8, 1/2 inch, which will be 2 5/8, move along 1 5/8, so that gives me 4 1/4. My next score line is at 4 3/4, and then I'm left with my 1 5/8 inch section at the end. So basically what I'm now going to do is I'm going to tape this piece to my top layer. I'm going to cut around each of these larger squares, and that's going to create the top element of the tray that my boxes are going to fit in. Now you could, if you don't want to go through this palaver, you could cut 8 half-inch strips and you could create the lattice for yourself, but my personal preference was I didn't like the look of where the lattice overlapped in these sections here, and I thought cutting into the top layer just gave a cleaner look. And what I would do is I would cut each half-inch strip to 7 7/8 of an inch, so that would give you the 6 7/8 inch length you need for the top, and give you a half-inch tab at either end, at which you could then attach the lattice piece to the side panels. My template is now stuck down to my main card top, and I'm just going to work my way round, cutting through the template into the cardstock below, cutting away the squares. Here's my cut grid, and you can see that my boxes fit quite nicely over there. What will happen is, because I've got a half-inch deep tray, obviously 1 inch of the box will stick out the top of the tray. So for the side panels, we want 4 strips which measure 7 3/8 by 1 3/8. Along the 7 3/8 side, we want to score at 1/2 inch for our glue tab. Rotate the strip, and along the shorter side we're going to score at 3/8 of an inch and 7/8 of an inch, and we're going to do that on all 4 pieces. And this is going to give us our 3/8 inch glue tab to adhere to the top part of the tray, our 1/2 inch side panel, and our 1/2 inch glue tab to adhere to the bottom part of the tray. To finish the preparation for the sides, we want to fold and burnish along all the score lines, and then all we want to do is snip up 2 score lines in the 1/2 inch tab and just create a small wedge into the glue tab to adhere the side panels together, and cut a wedge into the ends of the longer tabs. So now we're going to put the piece together, and we're going to do that with our normal box construction method. I'm going to apply glue to the 3/8 of an inch tab, and that is going to sit behind, and because we've done it 3/8 of an inch, we know that we're not going to get any sight of the tab overlapping into the, or jutting out into the squares. You can use obviously your preferred adhesive. I'm going to use my Kalal to lay the edge onto the tab. Take my next strip, apply glue to all the tabs, and adhere my second piece in place. So I'm going to lay that in there, push that in, and lay my next piece on top. There's my top grid adhered. I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to use my quick grab glue and just add a dab of glue in these corners, just to adhere the tabs together at the corners. Then once I've done that, I'm going to adhere glue to the top and add my base over the top. And as I add my base, I'm just squaring off any corners, squaring up the edges. So here's our tic-tac-toe tray box, all complete. I've done no decoration to this outer case. You could obviously put a band or something around the edges. I quite like the look of just with the red and gold, to be perfectly honest. So there you are. It's one of those projects with the boxes. It does seem to use quite a lot of cardstock, I think, because of obviously the treat boxes, but you might have scraps which are the right size for these. And it's one of those projects where I think if you were to get all these box pieces cut, you could sit in front of the TV and glue the boxes together. Perhaps the most difficult part and the time consuming part, if you don't have a die, is to cut the grid. And you can clearly resize this, make this as big, or as you could make these boxes 1 inch by 1 inch if you've got the patience of trying to create a little cube sized box. But I think it actually looks quite stylish. So I hope you've enjoyed this project. If you have, please give the video a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. Until next time, thanks for watching.